Hi, I'm Steve Hall, and this is the Best of Portland, and I'm here with Jeff Gudman. Jeff's been just elected to the Lake Oswego Council, and there's a lot of exciting things going on there. So we wanted to talk to him for a minute. But before that, I just wanted to get into a little bit about how we met. I want to hear your side of it in a way.
You bet. On election night, I and my friends, several of us, were at the Oswego Grill celebrating, first anticipating what would happen and then subsequently celebrating my election to the City Council. And we were enjoying the meal and the talk and the camaraderie. And while we were sitting there, Steve, you came by and had just completed an interview or had been talking about an interview you had done with another person. And we had kind of blocked your way to get around. And so we struck up a conversation and went from there. And you said, well, gosh, with you being elected to the council, why don't you and I have a conversation about some of the things that are happening in Lake Oswego? And I was delighted to accept.
Yeah. Well, part of the reason why I was at the Oswego Grill is because I had the opportunity to interview Bob Farrell and Dave Barnett at the Oswego Grill because they did such a fantastic job there, and it's a great place. So I meet all kinds of interesting people like yourself there.
Thank you.
But to get on to the subject matter, I wanted to ask you, one of the most important things in Lake Oswego is the streetcar project. Tell me a little bit about that. It's a pretty interesting subject.
It's a very interesting subject, and it was, I believe, one of the defining moments or defining issues of the election this few weeks ago and during the campaign for that. The streetcar is a proposal that's been around for several years, connecting Lake Oswego and downtown Portland along the old right-of-way that the city and a group of governments acquired many years ago, and it was an excellent investment that was made to preserve that right-of-way. Mm-hmm. And it has now reached the stage between the cities, the various governments, Metro, Tri-Met, and then on to the federal government, where there is an opportunity to have a streetcar going back and forth between Lake Oswego and Portland, and have a portion of that, perhaps up to as much as 60% of it, funded by the federal government.
Wow.
And yeah, it is. And that dialogue as to whether or not a streetcar and the associated development in the foothills area is a project that should or should not go ahead is, as I said, the defining issue for this last election.
Yeah. Well, I think the streetcar would be a fantastic thing just because of the proximity to the river and Lake Oswego and Portland. I think it would be a really cool thing. But just like everything, there's a good side and a bad side to it, and I'm sure it's going to cost some money too. So that's got to be considered in this economy, right? It
is. There are some substantial issues with respect to the streetcar. You've touched on one of them, just the cost of construction, and that cost keeps escalating. Mm-hmm. And so, as I call it, it's the capital cost. Now, we need to be very careful in the discussion about the streetcar because as a member of the Lake Oswego City Council, or member-elect of the Lake Oswego City Council, my primary concern is the cost that's going to come to the citizens of Lake Oswego. Mm-hmm. That is one portion of the total cost of the project, and as the project gets discussed among all the various parties, we always have to be careful to make sure we distinguish between the cost to the citizens of Lake Oswego and the cost to the region for the entire project. And that cost, which is an item which I've noted on several occasions, that cost to the citizens of Lake Oswego keeps going in one direction, and that direction is up. Yeah.
Well, my big concern is that something happens with the streetcar like that happened with the cable runway. I mean, that started out at one price, and I believe it ended up at almost 10 times that or 5 times that. Mm-hmm. And then what I just heard on the news the other day is a software program that the city contracted, and it's also escalated like crazy. I don't understand. Don't you contract with a company at a certain price within a certain, isn't that the way construction is supposed to work? That there's a fixed cost and a fixed time frame, and if it doesn't happen in that, isn't it the company's responsibility to carry that? It doesn't seem that way in city matters.
That's a fair point. When you get to large projects, there's always the challenge of trying to have the estimate of the cost of the project versus what is desired for the project. And what happens before you start and you're making your very best estimate, sometimes when the actual construction starts or the actual project starts with respect to information technology, you run into unanticipated problems, even though you try and anticipate that. And the two examples you've given are very accurate. The estimated cost versus what the final project costs are going to be is going to be has been substantially higher than the initial cost. On the other hand, you can have that go in the same direction. One example of that is the Lake Oswego Interceptor Sewer Project, fondly referred to as LOIS, where it is a replacement of, and a necessary replacement of the main interceptor line for sewage in Lake Oswego. That project, when it was before the construction actually started, the estimate for it, I believe, came in at about $120 million. I may not be entirely accurate on that number, but I think that the scale of it.
Yeah.
And at this point, it looks like that project is going to come in at approximately $90 million.
Nice.
It is very nice. The part of it has been just very good project management. The team inside the city, all the outside contractors have done a terrific job on that. One of the downsides of why it has come in under budget is that we've gone through this terrible, terrible recession, and contractors are cutting their costs, cutting their prices to do projects to the bone to try and keep their core of talented people together.
Right.
We have benefited from that. I'm not sure I'd want to have a terrible recession to get that benefit.
Right.
But it can go both ways with respect to what you estimate the cost is, and people do the very best they can in estimating the costs, and then you have to go forward and see where it leads.
Okay. So I'd like to ask your opinion on the streetcar. Is it a good thing for Lake Oswego or not?
At this time, I don't think it's a good thing for Lake Oswego. Absolutely retain the right-of-way.
Oh, definitely.
At some point in time, we will have the density, and it will justify it, and to give up the right-of-way, I think would be, I use this phrase, utter madness. Okay.
Yeah.
But I want to emphasize, retaining the right-of-way is something that absolutely needs to be done.
Definitely.
But with respect to the projected cost at this time, which for the city of Lake Oswego, 2 years ago, the share of Lake Oswego's share of the cost of the project was going to be the contribution of the right-of-way and no cash. The rest of the money would come from the federal government. And therefore, I was in favor of the project 2 years ago because I said, gosh, this is, it has a benefit. I can identify the benefit. Earlier this year, in August of 2010, as a part of the City Council accepted report for their 5-year projection of capital improvement projects, the cost was estimated for Lake Oswego to be $6 million. 1 month later, in September of this year, at the candidate orientation, which was done for all the 7 candidates running for City Council, and the streetcar project was on that list of projects that we were given an orientation about, the figure was $6 to $8 million. And then in the recent packet of material, which is a summary of questions and answers that's going before the City Council this Monday at a study session, the figures have now increased to anywhere from 12 to 17 or 18 million dollars.
Doesn't sound like it's going in the right direction.
It's not going in the right direction, and when you consider that the annual operating budget of the city is in the range of $75 million or so, that's a substantial sum, although it is a capital project and not an operating, but that gives you a sense of the scale of dollars. The other concern I have is the congestion. There is another element of the concern is why I'm opposed to it at this time. It's, as you pointed out, it's trade-offs.
Yes.
Is the projected multi-story parking structure in the Albertsons parking lot along State Street, and then lastly is what I call a larger public policy question that that is the important issue of providing infrastructure, which our community, not only Lake Oswego, but the greater metro region is debating. And that leads to a dialogue back and forth with respect to the Stafford Triangle and the eventual development that occurs out there. The city of Lake Oswego, West Linn, and Tualatin are all on record consistently opposing both the urbanization and of the Stafford Triangle area, and yet the numbers that are being used for justification on the number of people who would use the streetcar has the assumption of 7,000 additional housing units in the Stafford Triangle area, something that the council is opposed to and is on record opposed to. And I think that public, that dichotomy, you cannot be opposed to the urbanization and yet use urbanization to justify the ridership on a streetcar.
Sure. So clarify something for me. Stafford Triangle you've mentioned a couple of times. I need to know a little bit about how that's defined.
You bet. When you pull out a map, and I would encourage everybody watching, you can pull out a map of the greater Portland metropolitan area. It's the area that's bounded by, on the West Linn and Lake Oswego on the northern end, going down toward Interstate 205 and then extending past Interstate 205, and the shape of it is approximately in a triangle when you're looking at it. That area has been a source of vigorous debate over many years. Lake Oswego, West Linn, and Tualatin, I believe, Lake Oswego certainly, but I think they have gone to court over that in terms of its designation, and it is currently in the review process again about being designated as a part of the urban reserves.
Okay. So you mentioned 7,000 additional homes in that area is what they're building this projection on, yet Lake Oswego doesn't want another 7,000 homes in that area, and in my mind right now with this recession, it's unlikely that you're going to have 7,000 new homes in that area.
That's an excellent point, and I should, just to clarify, it's described as 7,000 housing units, so that could be either homes, condominiums, townhouses, apartments, and then the traffic, not the traffic, well, there's the traffic, but there's the number of people who would be living there from those 7,000 units generates, I think, between 85 and 90% of the projected usage for the streetcar. So if you don't have those 7,000 housing units, 85 to 90% of the usage that's projected for the streetcar disappears. The remaining usage on the streetcar can be handled by the city's own internal staff. They've acknowledged in a letter to the Land Conservation and Development Commission that the challenges that provides to traffic along Highway 43 and McAdam into Portland can be mitigated without having a streetcar. Now, but I want to emphasize, so a larger point is that goes back to the retention of the right-of-way. That's very important. The day will come when the density and the development that does occur will require doing the streetcar.
Yeah.
The federal program that is the matching dollars for, not matching, a portion providing of the dollars, currently projected at 60%. The streetcar program federally is not disappearing, so that if we aren't in the queue this time to receive federal dollars for the streetcar going back and forth between Portland and Lake Oswego, several years down the road, we will have that opportunity to participate in that queue again, and at that time we'll be able to make a much better case. My crystal ball isn't clear enough. I call it my crystal ball is generally in the shop being repaired, but that at that time, we can get back in the queue again and participate in that multi-year process when the streetcar, may at that time make sense for the community.
Well, I'm not involved in any of the political things, but in my mind, the streetcar is going to happen sooner or later in one form or another somewhere down the line anyways, because it just makes sense. But I'm understanding from you is now's not the time to move forward with that project. Is that kind of it?
You said it much better and in far fewer words than I did.
Okay, wonderful. Tell me a little bit about the library. There's